5 police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of my house, lights flashing like a crime scene. My wife Emily, fragile in her wheelchair, wasn't a criminal. But thanks to HOA, Karen Whitmore, she was about to be treated like one. The officers, led by some stiff named Officer Blake, marched up our driveway with hands on their belts demanding answers about HOA violations. Emily's hands trembled as she clutched the armrest of her chair, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Why are they here for me?" I knew why. Karen wanted to break us. She wanted to humiliate my disabled wife in front of the entire neighborhood. 5 cops at our doorstep was her idea of a victory parade. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that minutes later the entire street would shake under the thunder of 100 Harley Davidsons. And when that wall of chrome and leather rolled up to her gate, Karen's smug little empire would collapse in the blink of an eye. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Back before the flashing lights and police boots on my driveway, before Karen Whitmore's name was muttered like a curse in every household, our neighborhood was paradise. I don't mean that as a metaphor. I mean it was the kind of place you saw in glossy brochures for the American dream, tree-lined streets, kids riding bikes until sunset, neighbors grilling in their yards and sharing burgers over the fence. If you drove through, you'd slow down just to admire it. People waved at you even if they didn't know your name. It was that kind of place. My wife Emily loved it most of all. She's been in a wheelchair since the accident years ago, and trust me, finding a community where she wasn't treated like a burden was rare. Here, though, folks used to help her up the ramp I built, drop by with casseroles and ask her advice on gardening. She'd laugh with kids during Halloween, hand out candy from her lap with a smile that melted even the grumpiest old men. For once she felt like she belonged, not just tolerated, but belonged. That feeling mattered more than anything to her, and by extension to me. And presiding over all this peace was Dimitri. Old man Dimitri, the HOA president before Karen showed up, was a legend in his own right. He had an accent that made even grocery lists sound like poetry, and he treated the HOA less like a board and more like a family reunion committee. He organized Christmas parades with floats made from pickup trucks, 4th of July cookouts that went until midnight, and Easter egg hunts, so elaborate you'd think the White House staff had designed them. The man's handshake was firmer than a mortgage, and his word carried weight. Dimitri didn't enforce the rules with fines or threats. He enforced them with common sense. If someone's grass grew too long, he'd bring his own mower over. If a house needed paint, he'd rally the neighbors with brushes and beers. He believed in fixing problems, not weaponizing them. I'll admit I didn't always agree with him, but I respected him. We all did. He set the tone. For Emily, those days were golden. She found herself invited to porch gatherings, baking circles, even the neighborhood book club. There's something powerful about inclusion. When people treat you as part of the community rather than as a fragile other, you stop feeling small. I watched Emily blossom here. She laughed more. She spoke up more. She had a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen since before her accident. I remember one summer evening, kids running through sprinklers, the smell of ribs in the air, when Emily looked at me and said, "David, I think we finally found our forever home." I squeezed her hand and agreed. Back then, I believed it. Back then, none of us saw the storm clouds forming. Because while Dimitri's style kept the peace, not everyone appreciated it. In the shadows, there were whispers. A certain woman new to the block with sharp lipstick and sharper ambition complained that Dimitri was too lenient. She said our neighborhood could be so much more valuable if only we enforced every rule in the book. She scowled at kids leaving bikes on the sidewalk, muttered about decorations being tacky, and clicked her tongue at Emily's wheelchair ramp as though it were graffiti on a church wall. That woman, of course, was Karen Whitmore. At the time, Karen kept her claws sheathed. She smiled at block parties, brought store-bought cookies to potlucks, and laughed too loudly at jokes she didn't understand. She wore bright pink suits to HOA meetings, like she was running for governor. People brushed her off as quirky. "That's just Karen being Karen," they'd say, not realizing those were the first cracks in our paradise. When Dimitri finally retired, his grandkids lured him away to Florida. No one imagined Karen would slide into his chair. She was enthusiastic after all, and who else was raising their hand? We thought she'd carry on the traditions, maybe add some spice. Instead, she set fire to everything that made our neighborhood feel like home. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In those early days before Karen crowned herself queen, we still believed in the good. We still had barbecues where neighbors fought over who had the better ribs. We still had Christmas lights, so bright pilots probably used them for landing guidance. We still had Dimitri standing on his porch, beer in hand, watching it all with pride. And Emily, my Emily, still had peace. She could sit outside, sip her tea, and watch children laugh without fear of being judged. She was part of something bigger, something warm. That's what made what came next so brutal. Because when Karen finally showed her true colors, she didn't just attack me, she didn't just attack Emily, she attacked the very soul of the community. And she succeeded, at least for a while, in turning our little slice of paradise into a prison camp with HOA letterhead. Looking back, I can see the signs. The way she lingered at meetings, jotting down notes like a detective. The way her smile never reached her eyes. The way she clutched the HOA handbook like it was scripture ready to thump it on anyone's head who dared to color outside her lines. But hindsight is a cruel teacher. At the time we were blind. We thought we'd secured our forever home. We thought we'd beaten the odds and found a neighborhood where kindness still mattered. And maybe that's why it hurt so much more when paradise fell. Because we'd tasted how sweet it could be. And the person who poisoned it all, who ripped it from us piece by piece, was none other than Karen Whitmore. The day Dimitri announced he was retiring from the HOA, I swear I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. It wasn't just me, half the neighborhood gasped. The man was more than a president. He was the glue that kept us from tearing each other apart. He called us a family with shared fences, and somehow it stuck. We believed it, but Dimitri, being Dimitri, made his farewell sound noble. He said Florida Sunshine was calling his grandkids, wanted him around, and besides, this neighborhood can take care of itself now. He believed that. Poor man didn't realize we were handing the keys to a wolf who'd been circling the henhouse. Her name was Karen Whitmore. Karen had moved in about a year before Dimitri left. At first, she was just another resident with too much perfume and too little patience, but when Dimitri announced his retirement, she pounced. She showed up at the HOA meeting in a blazer so pink it could blind you, smiling like a politician with a stack of index cards in her manicured hands. She spoke about order values and preserving property integrity. Words that sounded fancy but felt like chains being polished. Most folks didn't care enough to challenge her. Running an HOA sounded boring. Who wanted to argue about mailbox heights or tree trimming schedules? So when Karen volunteered, people shrugged. Better her than me. That shrug sealed our fate. Her first few weeks were subtle. She walked the block with a clipboard scribbling notes about gutters, paint chips, and garden gnomes. Just observing, she told us, flashing that teeth-baring grin. Nobody thought much of it. Dimitri had always been hands-on too, but where Dimitri carried a rake, Karen carried a magnifying glass. Then came the letters. At first they were polite reminders. Dear resident, your lawn exceeds the recommended length of 3.5 inches. Please correct this within 48 hours. Sure annoying, but harmless. Then the tone changed. Failure to comply will result in fines. Then multiple violations may lead to legal action. She sent them like clockwork. You forgot to roll in your trash can letter. Your kid left chalk drawings on the sidewalk letter. A windstorm knocked over your recycling bin letter. I thought maybe she'd give us a pass on Emily's wheelchair ramp. It was built solid, painted to match the house, and hell, it was the reason Emily could even get through the front door. Dimitri himself had praised it. But Karen, she called it an eyesore, said it lowered curb appeal. I'll never forget the day she stood in front of it, hands on her hips, telling me we had 30 days to remove it. I laughed in her face. Remove it, my wife needs it. Karen didn't blink. Rules are rules, Mr. Russo. You can build a removable one, something less permanent. I wanted to snap back, ask her if she thought my wife's disability was just a temporary inconvenience. But Emily was watching from the window, and I didn't want her to see me lose control, so I bit my tongue, for the moment. But Karen wasn't satisfied with written threats. She wanted obedience. She strutted around like a sheriff, snapping pictures of houses, wagging her finger at kids riding scooters. She started banning things one by one. Halloween decorations, too garish. Christmas lights, too bright. 4th of July fireworks, too disruptive. Even the Easter egg hunt, unsanitary. She gutted our traditions until the neighborhood felt sterile, lifeless. The irony, she justified it all by saying she was protecting property values. But what good is a high property value when your home feels like a prison? Neighbors started whispering. At barbecues, what few were left, you'd hear murmurs. She's gone too far. But nobody spoke up publicly. Fear spread faster than gossip. If you crossed Karen, you could expect a letter, a fine, maybe even threats of court. People folded. And here's the kicker, Karen thrived on it. She strutted through the block meetings, quoting bylaws like scripture, cutting people off mid-sentence. She had this way of smirking when she won, like a cat who'd trapped another mouse. Emily tried to stay positive. She said, maybe if we follow the rules, she'll leave us alone. Bless her heart. She wanted peace so badly. But it didn't matter how clean our yard was, how neat the paint job, how perfect the mailbox height. Karen had locked onto us. I knew why Emily's wheelchair. My wife's very existence was a reminder that Karen couldn't control everything, and for someone like her that was unbearable. One night, Emily asked me, "David, why does she hate us so much?" I didn't know how to answer. All I could do was squeeze her hand and promise I'd handle it. Inside, though, I burned, because it wasn't just about us anymore. Karen was turning neighbors against each other, reporting minor infractions, threatening lawsuits. The laughter that once echoed down our street was gone, curtains stayed drawn, people avoided eye contact. It was as if our paradise had been drained of color, and Karen was painting everything gray. The worst part, she enjoyed it. You could see it in her eyes when she watched people crumble under her rules. Power wasn't a responsibility to her, it was a toy, and she played with it mercilessly. I should have seen what was coming next. I should have known she wouldn't stop with letters and bans. But I didn't. Not until she sent 5 cops to my front door, targeting the one person in my life who least deserved it. But that comes later. For now, all you need to know is this. By the time Karen tightened her grip, our community was unrecognizable. Dimitri's neighborhood of joy and unity had become Karen's private kingdom of fear. And in her kingdom, mercy was forbidden. It started with a whisper, then a sigh, then a storm brewing under the surface. People were tired. You could feel it in the air like static before a lightning strike. Karen Whitmore had turned our once vibrant neighborhood into a gulag with flower beds, and for a while everyone played along. But you can only squeeze people so hard before they snap. For me, the snapping point wasn't one of her endless letters or even her ban on 4th of July cookouts. It was watching Emily cry after opening yet another fine for the offense of leaving her wheelchair ramp in place. She read the letter out loud, her voice trembling, and when she got to the part where Karen threatened possible legal action, she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "David, maybe we should just move." Move. From the home she had finally felt safe in, from the street where she had found her first real circle of friends in years. I couldn't accept that. I swore to myself no more. So I did the one thing Karen never expected. I fought back. I started small. At the next HOA meeting, I raised my hand. "Point of order," I said, sounding more confident than I felt. "I'd like to propose a vote to recall the current president." The room went silent. Karen froze mid-smirk, her eyes narrowing. She stammered, "That's highly irregular." "Not according to Section 4 of the bylaws," I shot back. I had read the book cover to cover the night before, highlighted every clause. If enough residents request it, we can hold a recall election. "So let's put it to the people." Murmurs erupted. Neighbors glanced at one another, weighing courage against fear. And then, like a spark catching dry wood, Maria Lachinsky, our sweet elderly neighbor who baked cookies for every block party, stood up. "David's right. This isn't the neighborhood we signed up for. I second the motion." I'll never forget the look on Karen's face, a mix of fury and disbelief. She wasn't used to being challenged. For a moment she looked human fragile even. But it didn't last. Her smile snapped back into place, sharp as glass. "Fine," she said, "if you want to fight, you'll get one." And oh did we. The following weeks were a chess match. I went door to door talking to neighbors. Some were terrified. "David, if Karen finds out I support you, she'll bury me in fines," one man whispered. Others were eager. "About time someone stood up to her," said another, shoving his signature into my clipboard. Slowly the signatures piled up. People were sick of being afraid. Karen responded the only way she knew how, with intimidation. She mailed letters warning that recall elections were illegal. They weren't. She threatened to sue me personally for defamation. She couldn't. And then came the infamous cookie campaign. One morning she went door to door, carrying Tupperware tubs of cookies, plastering on her Stepford smile. "I just want us to get along," she cooed. "Don't listen to David, he's trying to divide us." Neighbors told me afterward that they didn't know whether to laugh or gag. The cookies tasted like chalk anyway, but Karen wasn't done. When persuasion failed, she reached for her favorite weapon, the police. It happened on a Wednesday evening. Emily and I were watching television when a cruiser rolled slowly down the street spotlight, sweeping across lawns. My stomach knotted. Sure enough, the next day, we got a letter from the HOA citing us for suspicious gatherings, because 2 friends had dropped by to check in. Suspicious gatherings. In our own home, Emily looked at me, her eyes red from nights of stress. "David," she said softly, "you have to keep going. Don't stop now." That's when I knew this fight wasn't just about bylaws or fines, it was about dignity. About whether my wife would be treated like a human being or a nuisance. So I doubled down. I organized backyard meetings, quiet at first, then larger as courage spread. Maria hosted one where half the block showed up whispering plans over cups of tea. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were resistance. Karen caught wind, of course. She sent another letter, this one in bold red ink, claiming that any attempt to undermine HOA leadership will result in legal escalation. She even hinted she'd get restraining orders. But the more she threatened, the more people realized how desperate she was. Fear was losing its grip. The turning point came when Emily, bless her soul, rolled into one of our secret meetings. She'd been quiet through most of the struggle, not wanting to burden anyone. But that night she spoke. Her voice was soft but steady. I came here thinking this was my forever home. I believed I belonged. But lately I've felt like I don't deserve to live here. And I know I'm not the only one Karen has made feel that way. But I'll tell you this, I refuse to leave. This is my home, and I will not be erased. You could hear a pin drop, and then applause. Loud, defiant applause. In that moment, my wife became the symbol of our fight. Not me, not Maria Emily. A disabled woman in a wheelchair had more courage than all of us combined. Word spread. More neighbors joined. The recall petition hit critical mass. And that's when Karen truly panicked. She unleashed everything: legal threats, smear campaigns, rumors whispered about Emily faking her disability. She tried to bribe people with promises of forgiveness if they stayed loyal. And when all that failed, she played her last card. She called the police. Not once, but multiple times, claiming we were harassing her. Each time the officers looked more annoyed than concerned. But she didn't care. She wanted to scare us into silence. She underestimated us. She underestimated Emily. Because while Karen believed fear would keep us divided, it did the opposite. It united us. And though we didn't know it yet, the day was coming when Karen's lust for control would backfire so spectacularly that her empire would crumble under the roar of 100 Harley-Davidsons. But first, she'd send 5 cops to our doorstep. And that was the moment everything broke. You know how villains in old movies always have that one scene where they twirl their mustache and reveal their master plan? That was Karen Whitmore in real life. Only instead of a mustache, she had lipstick, the shade of a traffic cone, and instead of cleverness, she had pure malice, dressed up as community values. After our petition gained steam, Karen went from smug to frantic. You could see it in the way she stormed out of HOA meetings muttering under her breath, or the way her smile looked pasted on like a Halloween mask slipping at the edges. But what really told me she was desperate were the rumors. Suddenly whispers spread that Emily was faking her disability, that she didn't really need the ramp, that maybe we'd built it to get attention. I wanted to punch a wall. Emily, who could barely make it through the day without pain, was now being painted as some kind of scam artist. It was cruel. It was insane. But that was Karen. When she couldn't beat you with rules, she'd shred your reputation instead. Still, the smear campaign didn't break us. Neighbors knew better. They'd seen Emily's struggles, helped her with groceries, watched her tire out just trying to make it from car to house. So Karen escalated. And by escalate, I mean she went nuclear. I later learned that Karen had been hanging out at a local dive bar trying to stir up allies. She spun wild stories to anyone who'd listen about how I was dangerous, how Emily was trouble, how our family was secretly plotting to take over the HOA. Most laughed her off. But one night she struck gold, or so she thought. She met a few off-duty cops nursing beers. And that's when her eyes lit up. To them, she complained about non-compliance, about domestic disturbances, about how unsafe she felt living near us. Now anyone with sense would have checked her claims. But Karen was persuasive when she needed to be, tears on command, clutching her pearls like Scarlett O'Hara. She painted us as menaces to the community. And to my horror, she convinced at least one of them to take her seriously. That's how Officer Blake entered the picture. Blake wasn't dirty, not exactly. He was overworked, cynical, and too willing to believe the loudest voice in the room. Karen made sure her voice was the loudest. By the time she was done, Blake thought he was dealing with public enemy number 1 me. But she didn't stop there. No, Karen wanted theater. She wanted a scene so humiliating, so terrifying, that Emily and I would either quit the recall effort or move out entirely. So she demanded action. She pushed until Blake and 4 other officers agreed to check in at our address. It wasn't enough to send a letter. It wasn't enough to issue a citation. Karen wanted flashing lights, sirens, neighbors peeking from curtains. She wanted Emily, a disabled woman in a wheelchair, paraded like a criminal on her own porch. I didn't know all this at the time. What I did know was that Karen started watching our house more than usual. Sitting in her Lexus across the street, sunglasses on, phone in hand, one night I caught her recording me carrying groceries. Another time I saw her snapping photos of Emily through our front window. When I confronted her, she laughed. Just documenting violations, she said. Violations. That was her favorite word. The night before it all went down, Emily and I were having dinner. She was quieter than usual, picking at her food. Finally, she looked at me and said, "David, she's not going to stop, is she?" I shook my head. Number. She won't stop until we stop her. But I didn't realize how far she'd go. The next morning, Karen filed an official incident report with the HOA and forwarded it directly to the police department. In it, she accused Emily of creating a hazardous environment with her wheelchair ramp, of causing emotional distress to neighbors, and of threatening HOA leadership. The sheer absurdity of it would have been funny if it hadn't been so dangerous. That same afternoon, Blake and his crew rolled into our street, 5 cruisers, lights flashing like they were about to bust a meth lab. Karen trailed behind in her Lexus, grinning ear to ear. She had orchestrated it perfectly, a show of force designed to break us. I remember Emily's face when the first officer knocked on our door. She was pale, trembling, eyes wide with fear. She kept saying, "David, what did I do? Why are they here?" And all I could do was hold her hand and whisper, "Nothing. You did nothing." But Karen didn't care about truth. She cared about spectacle. She wanted the whole neighborhood to see Emily humiliated, to see me powerless, to see fear etched into every window on the block. And for a moment she succeeded. The officers questioned Emily like she was a suspect. They demanded paperwork. They asked about violations. They treated our home like a crime scene, all while Karen watched from across the street, arms folded, a smug smile stretching across her face. That was her evil plan, not just to intimidate, but to crush, to make sure no one else dared stand against her. But what Karen didn't realize was that in trying to isolate us, she had awoken something far bigger. Because I wasn't alone. I had brothers, men who roared louder than sirens, whose loyalty wasn't written in bylaws but burned into the asphalt by steel and chrome. And when Karen seeked 5 cops on my disabled wife, she triggered the one thing she could never control: the thunder of 100 Harleys. The knock at my door that day wasn't polite. It was the kind of knock that rattles glass panes and makes your stomach drop. Emily jumped in her chair, her hand tightening around mine. Outside, red and blue lights strobed across our living room walls. 5 police cruisers lined our curb like we were running a cartel instead of trying to live our lives. When I opened the door, Officer Blake stood there, broad shoulders filling the frame. Behind him, 4 other officers loomed, hands resting on their belts. Blake's voice was flat, all business. "Mr. Russo, we've received multiple complaints regarding violations and disturbances. We need to ask your wife a few questions." I narrowed my eyes. Violations? She's disabled, for God's sake. What could she possibly have done? From the corner of my eye, I spotted her, Karen, leaning against her Lexus across the street. Sunglasses, clipboard, smug grin, plastered across her face like she'd just won the lottery. She was recording on her phone, waiting for the scene to unfold. Emily wheeled herself forward, her voice trembling. I don't understand. Why are you here? I didn't do anything." Blake didn't flinch. "Ma'am, there are concerns about non-compliance and possible threats to HOA leadership." I almost laughed. Threats Emily couldn't swat a fly without apologizing to it. My fists clenched. "This is harassment," I spat. "You're being used as muscle for a power-hungry HOA president." Blake's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just repeated, "We're here to ask questions." The neighbors started trickling out, pretending to check mail, walking their dogs, holding their phones suspiciously high. They knew a show when they saw one. Karen made sure she had an audience. She wanted everyone to see Emily cower. But Emily didn't cower. Her hands shook, her voice cracked, but she looked those officers in the eyes and said, "This is my home. I have nothing to hide." That broke something in me. I stepped between her and Blake, chest out, voice steady. "You want to talk to her? You go through me. And unless you've got a warrant, this conversation's over." Silence stretched. Blake stared at me, weighing his options. He wasn't a bad man, I could tell, just caught in Karen's web. Still, his presence, his badge, his backup, it was enough to make anyone feel small. And that was the point. Karen's point. Behind me, Emily's breathing quickened. I could hear her whispering prayers under her breath. I had to end this. But how? How do you fight an HOA president who's weaponized the police? That's when a memory hit me. The sound of roaring engines, the smell of gasoline and leather. My younger years, when I wasn't just David Russo, suburban homeowner, I was David Road Dog Russo, patch-wearing brother of the Steel Serpents MC. It had been years since I rode with them. I traded the adrenaline for a steady paycheck, the highways for cul-de-sacs. But brotherhood like that doesn't fade. It stays in your bones and your blood. And I knew deep down if I made the call, they'd come. I excused myself, pretending to grab paperwork. In the kitchen, I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling as much from anger as from nerves. I scrolled to a number I hadn't dialed in years. Jack Ironhand Miller. My brother, my leader. When he answered, his gravelly voice hit me like a freight train. Road dog, damn, it's been a while. I cut straight to it. Jack, I need help. My wife, she's disabled. HOA's using cops to harass her. They've got 5 cruisers outside right now. A pause, then a growl. Karen Whitmore, right, my heart skipped. You know her, everyone knows her. She's been stirring up trouble all over. Don't worry, brother. Say the word. I didn't hesitate. Word. Jack's voice hardened. Stay put. You'll hear us before you see us. I slid my phone back into my pocket and returned to the door. Blake was still waiting, shifting uncomfortably, like even he was starting to question the circus he'd walked into. Karen, though, oh, she was beaming. She thought she'd won. Minutes ticked by, neighbors whispered. Emily clutched my arm, asking, "What now?" And then it began. At first it was faint, like distant thunder rolling over the hills. Then louder, a low growl turning into a roar. Windows rattled, dogs barked. Every head on the block turned as the sound grew closer, stronger, unstoppable. Karen's smile faltered. She lowered her phone, squinting down the street. What is that? What it was salvation. Over the hill, chrome glinted in the sun. 1 Harley, then 5, then 20. A flood of leather, steel, and thunder engines roaring in unison. By the time they hit our street, it wasn't 20 anymore, it was closer to 100. A wall of Harleys lining the curb, blocking the road, drowning out the sirens with raw, defiant power. Neighbors gasped, some cheered, phones flew up to record. And Karen. She went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish yanked from water. Jack Miller led the pack, beard streaked with gray tattoos blazing under his cut. He pulled up front, killed his engine, and swung off his bike. His boots hit the pavement like hammers. He looked at me, then at Emily, then at Blake. You boys here to protect and serve, or just to scare innocent women, he barked. Blake swallowed hard. The other officers shifted uncomfortably. One by one, they lowered their hands from their belts. The balance of power had shifted. Karen stumbled forward, shouting, "They're a gang! Arrest them now!" Jack turned, his voice booming like the engines behind him. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We're here to make sure justice is served. And right now, justice means leaving this family the hell alone." The street erupted in cheers. Neighbors who had been silent for months suddenly found their voices again. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt it hope. Karen had her 5 cops. But I had 100 Harleys. And the standoff, it was only just beginning. I've heard a lot of sounds in my life. Sirens, gunfire, storms, tearing roofs off houses, but nothing compares to the roar of 100 Harley-Davidsons shaking the ground beneath your feet. It's not just noise, it's a living, breathing force. It rattles windows, vibrates in your chest, and tells the whole damn world we're here and we're not afraid. That roar swallowed our little street. What began as Karen's circus of flashing lights and smug gloating turned into a full-blown spectacle. Engines idled like thunderclouds, chrome gleamed like fire under the sun, and neighbors poured out of their houses, phones held high. Kids covered their ears, dogs barked like mad, and old man Jenkins down the block just grinned, muttering, "Well, I'll be damned." Emily sat in her chair, tears streaming, not from fear this time, but from awe. She gripped my hand and whispered, "David, they came for us." I squeezed back, choking up. "They came for you, sweetheart." Karen, on the other hand, was unraveling. Her face, usually painted with arrogance, twisted into raw panic. She screamed over the engines, her voice cracking. "They're criminals. They're dangerous. Arrest them, Blake. Do your job." Officer Blake looked like he wanted to melt into the asphalt. He shifted, cleared his throat, then muttered, "Ma'am, this is outside my jurisdiction." "Jurisdiction," Karen shrieked, jabbing her manicured finger at me. "They're a gang. You're letting them intimidate me." But the intimidation wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed at the corruption she represented. And everyone on that street knew it. Jack Ironhand Miller stepped forward, his boots heavy on the pavement. He towered over Karen, eyes cold but steady. His voice cut through the roar like a blade. "Lady, you've been using your title to bully a disabled woman. You sicked 5 cops on her like she was a criminal. That ends today." Karen tried to backpedal, stammering, "No, you don't understand. She's been violating HOA rules. She's Jack barked, a laugh deep and guttural. Rules. You think rules justify cruelty. You think paperwork makes it right to break a woman's spirit. Let me tell you something. We live by rules too. Brotherhood, loyalty, respect. And you violated every damn one of them. The bikers behind him revved their engines in unison, the sound so deafening Karen actually flinched and stumbled backward. Neighbors started shouting too. "Leave them alone, Karen," one woman yelled. "We're tired of your nonsense," another man added. For months they'd been silent, cowed by fines and threats, but now they had backup. 100 roaring engines gave them courage Karen could never crush. Karen whipped around desperate. "Blake, do something." But Blake only shook his head. "This is between you and them, Miss Whitmore. I'm not getting involved." He gestured to his officers, and one by one they retreated to their cruisers. Sirens went dark. The flashing lights blinked off. For the first time that day, our street belonged to us again. Karen's veneer cracked completely. Her voice turned shrill. "You can't do this to me. I'm the president of this HOA. I am the law here." Jack stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Number, you're not the law. You're just a bully with a clipboard. And today, the neighborhood's done with you." She spun toward the crowd of neighbors, desperate for support. "You all need me. Without me, this place will fall apart. Property values will plummet," but the neighbors weren't buying it. Phones were still recording, capturing every second. Some even laughed. Maria Lachinsky, standing at the edge of the crowd with her arms crossed, shouted, "We don't need you, Karen. We never did." Karen's face went ghost white. For the first time, she wasn't in control. Jack turned back to me, his voice lower but heavy with meaning. "Road Dog, this is your fight. Say the word and we'll finish it." I looked at Emily, at the tears in her eyes, at the courage it had taken for her to endure all of this. Then I looked at Karen, trembling and red-faced, clutching her clipboard like it could save her. My voice was steady. "Finish it." Jack raised his hand. The engines roared again, this time like a war cry. Neighbors cheered, their voices joining the thunder. Karen screamed something incoherent, but it was drowned out completely. Her words no longer mattered. In that moment, the power shifted forever. Karen's reign of terror was over. She had 5 cops. I had 100 Harleys. And no amount of bylaws, fines, or fake authority could drown out the roar of justice rolling through her gate. As the engines finally quieted, Jack leaned close to me and said, "Tomorrow shall be nothing but a bad memory. Tonight you stand tall with your family." And for the first time in months, I believed him. When the engines finally quieted and the smoke settled, Karen Whitmore stood in the middle of the street like a queen stripped of her crown. Her pink blazer was wrinkled, her hair a mess from tugging at it in frustration. Neighbors circled at a safe distance, phones still raised, recording every twitch of her face. For months, she had orchestrated public humiliation against others. Now she was the star of her own downfall. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to regain control. "This is harassment. You're all complicit. Every single one of you will regret this," but no one was afraid anymore. Not after seeing her empire crumble in real time. Maria Lachinsky, bless her steel spine, stepped forward. She was barely 5 feet tall, cardigan hanging loosely off her shoulders, but at that moment she looked 10 feet tall. "Karen," she said, her voice steady, "the community has had enough. As of tonight, I'm calling an emergency HOA vote, and judging by the looks around me, you don't have a single ally left." A murmur of agreement swept the crowd. Hands went up. People shouted, "Aye." It wasn't formal, not by any stretch of the bylaws, but the message was clear. Karen was done. Karen's eyes darted frantically, searching for Blake and his officers, but their cruisers were already gone. She turned to me, her finger trembling with rage. "This is your fault, Russo. You think you've won. You think these animals can protect you forever," Jack Ironhand Miller smirked. "Lady, we don't need to protect him forever. Just long enough for you to face the music." The final blow came not from me, not from Jack, but from the very community Karen had terrorized. One neighbor shouted, "We're sick of the fines." Another yelled, "You stole our holidays." A mother cried out, "My kids were afraid to play outside because of you." One voice after another joined in, until it was a chorus of grievances too loud to ignore. Karen stumbled back, clutching her clipboard like a shield. I was just trying to preserve order." "No," Maria snapped, her voice like a gavel. "You were trying to preserve power, and now it's gone." With that, Karen turned and bolted toward her Lexus, slamming the door and peeling out of the driveway so fast she nearly clipped her own mailbox. The crowd erupted into cheers, louder than fireworks on the 4th of July. The monster was gone, but the story didn't end there. The very next day, Maria organized a formal HOA meeting at her house. Dozens of neighbors showed up, many for the first time in months. There was no fear in the air, only relief and a cautious hope. Jack and a few of the bikers even parked nearby their presence, a reminder that Karen wasn't coming back. We took the vote. It was unanimous. Karen was removed as president, stripped of her power. Maria was elected in her place, and the applause shook the walls. I saw Emily clap too, her smile brighter than it had been in years. Maria wasted no time. "First order of business," she said, "all ridiculous fines are voided. Second, all community traditions, Halloween, Christmas, the 4th of July, are reinstated immediately. And third," she turned to Emily, "this neighborhood will never again question your right to be here. Your ramp stays." Tears filled Emily's eyes as the room applauded. She whispered, "Thank you," her voice cracking with relief. In the weeks that followed, our street transformed almost overnight. Decorations reappeared. Kids laughed in the yards again. Neighbors hosted barbecues without looking over their shoulders. It was like color seeping back into a black and white picture. And Emily, she became a symbol of resilience. People stopped by just to tell her how much her courage meant to them. Someone even hung a banner at the next block party that read, "Welcome home, Emily." She blushed and tried to wave it off, but I saw the pride in her eyes. She finally felt like she belonged again. As for me, I realized something important. Sometimes it takes more than one voice to bring down a tyrant. Sometimes it takes a roar. Karen had tried to use fear to divide us, but in the end she united us without meaning to. Oh, and one more thing. Remember that biker brotherhood I called in? Turns out one of the riders, Tommy Judge Malone, wasn't just an old friend. He was an actual lawyer, and a damn good one. He'd been keeping quiet the whole time, but after the vote he promised to file legal protections ensuring Karen couldn't retaliate against Emily or the HOA. "Consider it ironclad," he said with a wink. With Karen gone, Emily and I sat on our porch one evening watching neighbors set up string lights for the Christmas parade. Kids practiced carols, Maria passed out cookies, and Jack's crew rode by, slowly honking and waving like heroes on a victory lap. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think it's finally over?" she asked. I smiled, wrapping my arm around her. "Yeah," I said. "It's over. Paradise is back. For the first time in months, peace wasn't a dream. It was real. And it was ours." Looking back, I realized this story was never just about Karen or fines or even the 5 cops she sent to my door. It was about power and what happens when someone abuses it. Bullies always think they can hide behind titles, rules, or uniforms. They believe fear is enough to keep people silent, and sometimes for a while it works. But here's the truth. I learned fear only wins if you stand alone. The moment you find the courage to speak up and others join you, that fear loses its grip. Karen thought she could crush my wife, humiliate her, erase her. Instead, Emily became the heartbeat of a community that remembered what it meant to care, to stand shoulder to shoulder, to roar louder than intimidation. Justice doesn't always come in courtrooms or police reports. Sometimes it comes in the form of 100 engines rolling down your street, reminding you that loyalty, respect, and unity are stronger than any HOA bylaw. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this: protect the vulnerable, fight for what's right, and never underestimate the power of a community that refuses to back down. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever faced a bully, HOA or otherwise, and found strength in standing together? Share your story in the comments below. And if you want more tales of HOA justice, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next.